target audience that they've got. People might want to steal your home, but you want a good cigar. Like, that was the whole gist.
Because you're a liberal helper, you said, pro tip, if you think you found a hard drive with evidence on it, don't open it. See, if you do, people will think you planted stuff on it, and the criminal's defense will have it thrown out.
Yep.
Oh, and don't keep it and pass it around among friends for a year. So those are right. By the way, our friends at Mueller, she wrote, who have followed this stuff intently, said the PDFs of the Biden emails were created in Central Europe on 10/10/19, 6 months after the laptop was dropped off in Delaware. Do you know who was in Central Europe on 10/10/19? Firtash in Vienna, the place Parnas and Furman were off to when they were nabbed and indicted on 10/10/19. Yes. I mean, somebody said this couldn't. David Frum, I said this couldn't be more fake if it had a plastic mustache, fake glasses on it.
Absolutely. There's a bunch too. I think this is, weirdly enough, I think this is rooted in last.
French police have arrested 15 people as part of their investigation into the beheading of a teacher who'd shown cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to his students. Global infections from the coronavirus have now passed 40 million. European nations are struggling to cope with the surge of new cases. Belgium, Italy and Austria are the latest to impose new restrictions. With 2 weeks to go till the election, President Trump has told supporters that if he'd listened more to scientists, the US would be in a depression. His challenger Joe Biden accused him of mishandling the pandemic. And anti-government protests in Bangkok are into a 6th consecutive day, despite an increasingly tough response from authorities. Protesters want reforms to the constitution and the monarchy. Police are threatening to close 4 media outlets for spreading what they're calling distorted information.
Here's your midday brief for Monday, October 19th. I'm J.R. Whalen for the Wall Street Journal. The Supreme Court has agreed to review 2 of the Trump administration's most controversial immigration actions: the construction of a southern U.S. border wall with militant funds, and the administration's so-called Remain in Mexico policy. It requires asylum seekers at the border to wait in Mexico while the requests are considered. For each case, the justices will hear the administration's appeals of lower court rulings that found its actions unlawful. Oil giant ConocoPhillips has agreed to buy shale rival Concho Resources for $9.7 billion. It would be the largest U.S. oil deal since the coronavirus pandemic began. The acquisition would give ConocoPhillips, the largest oil producer in Alaska, a much larger footprint in the hottest oil field in the Permian Basin of Texas and New Mexico, the nation's top oil basin. And the combined company would be the largest U.S. oil independent. And a technical problem halted trading on several European stock exchanges for about 3 hours this morning, the latest in a series of shutdowns to hit the world's biggest exchanges. The glitch on nearly all exchanges owned by Euronext comes at one of the busiest times of the year for European stock markets, the height of earnings season. Trading resumed early Monday afternoon in Europe.
We're in Hanoi, where Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide is meeting with his Vietnamese counterpart Nguyen Xuan Phuc. The two are expected to discuss strengthening regional security and boosting economic ties. It's Suga's first overseas trip since taking office last month. The visit comes just weeks before Vietnam is set to host the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit. On Sunday, Suga said he wants to reaffirm ties with ASEAN, emphasizing Japan's policy of creating a free and open Indo-Pacific region based on the rule of law. China has been steadily increasing its maritime activity in the South China Sea. Beijing claims most of the area, but Vietnam and some other ASEAN countries have competing territorial claims. On the economic front, Suga is expected to discuss how to strengthen Japanese supply chains in Vietnam amid the coronavirus pandemic. The ASEAN country exports many products to Japan, including personal protective equipment. Further relaxing entry restrictions between the two countries are also on the agenda. The two prime ministers are scheduled to hold a joint news conference later in the day. People in Hanoi are expressing high expectations for the summit talks, especially when it comes to security and economic-related issues.
I hope that the summit talks will lead to bilateral defense cooperation that can help protect Vietnam's sovereignty in the South China Sea.
Vietnam intends to strengthen ties with Japan through defense cooperation. And Hanoi welcomes Japan's intention to contribute to peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. The Vietnamese government wants to attract more capital investment from Japan. Some people voiced hope that bilateral ties will boost economic activity, which has been hurt by measures implemented to deal with the coronavirus pandemic.
I hope this visit can create more job opportunities in Japan for Vietnamese workers. I also hope it leads to building new infrastructure like the metro project in Ho Chi Minh City, which Japan has invested in.
Japan is the largest recipient of workers from Vietnam. The country's leaders are expected to ask the Japanese delegation for further cooperation. There is just over 2 weeks until the U.S. presidential election, and campaigning is kicking into high gear, with President Donald Trump and Democratic candidate Joe Biden trying to sway voters in key battleground states. Trump has been spending a lot of time in Nevada. 4 years ago, he narrowly lost the state. After starting the day there, he made a quick stop in California and then returned to Nevada for an evening rally.
And you know what? 16 days from now, we're going to win the state of Nevada. We're going to win 4 more years in the White House. And we're going to keep it going. Early voting is underway, so get out and vote.
Meanwhile, Democratic contender Joe Biden is stumping in the battleground state of North Carolina, where Trump won by a slim margin in 2016.
I'm running as a proud Democrat, but I will govern as an American president. No red states, no blue states, just the United States. I promise you, I'll work as hard for those who don't support me as those who did. That's the job of a president, a duty to care for everyone in America. Folks.
Biden also urged people to cast ballots as early as possible. According to the Associated Press, more than 22 million people have already voted. In the Middle East, Israel has reached another historic agreement with one of its Arab neighbors. It's establishing formal diplomatic ties with Bahrain in a deal brokered by Washington. Bahrain invited U.S. and Israeli delegations to its capital on Sunday for talks. Bahrain and Israel announced they have agreed to cooperate in areas including communications and agriculture. That's after an initial agreement signed at the White House last month. That followed a similar deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Bahrain has close ties with the U.S., hosting the U.S. Fifth Fleet Command that operates in the Persian Gulf. Its government could be aiming to step up pressure on its longtime foe, Iran, through cooperation with the U.S. and Israel. But many of Bahrain's Shia Muslims oppose the normalization of relations with Israel. Shias make up the majority of its population, and observers say that could impact how the deal plays out. Japan's exports and imports continue to recover last month from a pandemic downturn. The overall figures remained negative compared to last year, but the declines are getting smaller. Exports were down nearly 5% in September from a year ago. The negative figure still shows a path of recovery from May, when it plunged nearly 30%. Exports to the U.S. increased for the first time in 14 months. Shipments to China jumped 14%, the third straight month of gains, as the world's second largest economy recovers. Exports to the EU still show a large drop, but it's smaller than previous months. Imports also tumbled, sinking 17.2%. The figure was nonetheless an improvement from August. Japan posted an overall trade surplus for the third straight month. It stood at 675 billion yen, about $6.4 billion. Major Japanese electronics manufacturers have opened online showrooms to support sales amid the coronavirus pandemic. They're betting on digital technology to compensate for slumping customer traffic at their bricks-and-mortar outlets. Panasonic launched an online showroom using virtual reality technology in September. It's a digital recreation of an actual location in Tokyo that showcases products for corporate clients. Customers are invited through a video conferencing system. They can observe the movements of robotic arms or listen to an explanation of facial recognition technology while watching a video clip. Meanwhile, Sony sales staff this month started introducing products online with handheld cameras from a showroom for business clients.
Overseas customers cannot easily cross borders to come to us. I hope they get a sense of our products with these remote presentations.
Sony's virtual tours enable customers to find out more about products, including its professional video cameras and the Aibo dog-shaped robot. Now turning back to Vietnam, where unusually wet weather has claimed more lives. A landslide hit an army barracks in the central province of Quang Tri on Sunday, burying at least 22 people. The government says emergency crews are still searching for survivors at the site. A dozen bodies have been recovered so far. Recent wet weather has caused a number of landslides and widespread flooding in the central part of the country, and more rainfall is expected. Disaster management authorities say dozens of people have died across the country. Azerbaijan and Armenia are accusing each other of breaching a second ceasefire agreement over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. The two former Soviet republics initially agreed to stop fighting from October 10th, but clashes continued. That prompted Russia to broker another ceasefire that was due to take effect on Sunday. Several hours into the agreement, Armenia reported that artillery attacks by the Azerbaijani military had caused deaths and injuries. In turn, Azerbaijan accused its neighbor of carrying out mortar attacks. More than 800 people, including 96 civilians, have died since fighting first erupted on September 27th. Nagorno-Karabakh is a mountain territory. It's internationally recognized as a part of Azerbaijan, but populated and governed by ethnic Armenians. The failure by the countries to implement two ceasefires is point of concern for the international community. The latest reported breakdown could hamper humanitarian efforts, including prisoner exchanges and the handing over of bodies. People in France took to the streets on Sunday to pay their respects to a junior high school teacher killed in a suspected terrorist attack. Thousands attended vigils across the country on Sunday.
I feel deep sorrow. Freedom of expression should always be protected.
As a French citizen and a Muslim, I came here to say no to terrorism.
The male teacher was targeted in a knife attack outside Paris on Friday by an 18-year-old Russian-born man of Chechen origin. Prosecutors are treating the case as an act of terrorism. They say it may be linked to the teacher's lesson about freedom of expression, which included showing students a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad that was published by French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. In 2015, Islamic extremists stormed Charlie Hebdo's Paris office after the magazine published the cartoons. 12 people were killed.